this month we have Dr Carolina Kuepper-Tetzel of the University of Dundee School of Social Science, subdiscipline psychology, which is what I'm in. And we are going to hear about memory. So I'll hand over at this point. Thank God for that.
So, who am I? I'm a lecturer in psychology here at the University of Dundee. My name is Dr. Carolina Kuepper-Tetzel. What did I do before? Before coming here, I spent 2 years in the United States at Washington University in St. Louis. And I worked there with Mark McDaniel in order to look at different learning strategies and how you can apply them to large lecture classes in the natural sciences. Before that, I did my PhD at the University of Mannheim, which is in Germany, in cognitive psychology. Again, investigating one of the learning strategies that I will be presenting today, the spaced practice. I come to that later. And now I'm here. I'm thrilled to be here and present to you a little bit of what I do and giving you hands-on recommendations on how to implement research-based findings into your own practice. Before I start though, I need to know who you are, because as I said, the first time I'm here at Café Science, so I like to know who my audience is. So raise your hand if you are a student. Okay. Cool stuff. Raise your hand if you are a lecturer, instructor, a teacher at some university or school. Okay. Raise your hand if you are involved with developing curricula in education institutions. Okay. Good. And I assume that all the other ones are just interested in science, and I'm very thankful that you're here today. So cool. What I will be talking about today, we'll be talking about learning strategies and principles from cognitive psychology, which is an area, a discipline in psychology that tries to understand how we think, how we remember things, how we make judgments, how we make decisions in our lives, and how we learn. And so I will be picking the best researched learning strategies and try to explain to you how they work, how you can implement them, and what the challenges are. So before I do this, before I dive in, let me ask you, how do you study? So what is your go-to study strategy? Or if you teach, what's your go-to teaching strategy? So a student, so what do you do if you want to study for an exam?
Mind maps.
Mind maps? Okay, so when you create a mind map, how do you work with it? Do you have your book open and you try to create a mind map? That's what you do?
Yeah, to begin with, I just regurgitate as much information as possible, just off the top of my head, and then try to build it in after that. Pictures help as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other learning strategy from a student? Yeah.
I tend to do lists, so I'm a less pictorial, more kind of list oriented. But I will kind of go back to my notes, I'll expand, I'll then introduce them, and I'm still on the point I'll repeat the process until I can do it from memory and I can, from diagrams, explain something.
Good, thank you. Maybe a third one? Yeah, please.
Specific studies.
Is it again what?
Reading.
Reading. Okay, so reading and expanding on that. So if you heard about one study, you expand it and read another one, for example. Okay, good. Thank you so much. Any teachers, what is your go-to teaching strategy? Seems to be more difficult.
Doing practical, getting the students to do practical things.
Like for example, so...
So it could be building something or something that just asks them to move around a room and engage with each other.
Okay. Anything else? One more maybe? Yeah, please.
Bringing in emotion, making it funny, trying to make some connection with something.
To make it distinct in a certain way? Okay. Yes, please.
Get them to explain to each other.
That's a good one. Yes. Okay, yeah, please.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, my most memorable teaching experience was when I engaged in oral exchange. And the students were expected to do most of the talking, and I did most of the listening.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much for your input. So, what are we talking about today is partly what you already said, but then partly not. So what the first, before I start, I created the thing. So at Pimp My Memory is my Twitter handle, so feel free to Twitter. We're using the hashtag Cafe Science. So if you're up for Twitter, Twitter your fingers away. So the first learning strategy that I would like to explain to you and introduce you to is spaced practice. Okay? So spaced practice, what is it? And now I need someone to hold my microphone.
Is this where you have some wine beforehand?
So, I stole this from my... Okay, I stole this from my son. He let me use this. So now, what I'm going to outline here are two scenarios, two study scenarios, okay? Those yellow labels are the tests, so the final exam that you will have at the end of the semester, so your final test. So you have two things you could do, right? The first one, and this is what most students do if you ask them, this is what research shows, is you can study, put all your study time of a subject right before the test in a mass fashion, which is also called cramming, okay? Another thing you could do, you can distribute your practice. So you do a little bit studying here and a little bit studying there, okay? And what research has repeatedly shown since 1885 is if you distribute your practice, your memory and your performance on the final test will be much more improved than if you mass your practice. And it will not only be beneficial for your final test that you take at the end of the semester, no, the good thing is that you will be able to remember that information a month later, a year later, and so on. So if you plan ahead, you will be able to maintain much more knowledge about what you learn in school than if you cram everything into one session. Because this cramming, as fast as you learn something, the faster you will be forgetting it later on. So in this condition, the first one, if you ask a student about knowledge to produce any knowledge about this topic, 2 weeks later, they will have forgotten everything. Okay, this is spaced practice. So how could we implement this as a teacher or as a student? So for example, as a student, one thing you could do is not review the material right after class when everything is still fresh in your memory. You just let some time pass by, let the new information actually be forgotten a little bit, and instead of reviewing it right away on that evening, you review it 2 days later. Okay? As a teacher, what you can do, or a lecturer, you can revisit a specific topic after you have introduced other topics. So if you introduce topic A on a Monday, let's say, You just let it sink a little bit, let it forget a little bit. And then you just react, like do a very small task at the beginning of your lecture, like 10 minutes max, you don't need more than this, to reactivate what you have taught them on a Monday. You do this, let's say, on a Thursday or Friday. Well, those are easy things to do, and you don't need much time, and the effects are really big using that strategy. Strategies come with challenges, and one logistic or two logistic challenges of the space practice strategy is that you have to plan ahead. So at the beginning of the semester, when you know, okay, this is when I have class, you have to start planning when are you going to do your review sessions, when are you going to repeat reviewing, and so on. So this is a challenge of this strategy. Another thing I'm asked very often when I give talks like that is, how long should the time between one session and the other session be, right? How long should it be? And the quick answer to that is, we don't know. Okay. Research is still looking into that, and my own research shows that it is depending on very different factors. Later on I will tell you, or will give a recommendation on what you can do right away, but the optimal lag is something that's still under debate. Okay? Just a very quick thought experiment. So let's say, okay, you have scheduled your learning session. So you have scheduled when you will review your material that you learned in your lecture, that you were taught recently, that you, for example, read in a textbook. How should the second, so you already decided, yeah, I'm going for the spacing thing, I like that, right? So I have spacing, and then we have the final test. So what should happen during that session, second session, okay? There are many options. Well, the one thing you could do, you could just do the exact same thing what happened during the first session. So if, for example, during the first session, you were presented with the material on slides, you could, for example, revisit the slides, look at the slides again, okay? So, or if you read a text passage during session 1, you could reread it again during session 2. That's one thing you could do. Another thing you could do a concept map, like you explained, for example. And one way to do it is, as again, you open your notes, and you try to create a concept map while looking at your notes. Again, a thing you could do. And another thing you could do is, you don't look at your notes and the material and the slides at all. Okay? You don't look at them. What you can do is, you just have questions, and you answer the questions just from memory. And different studies have actually pit those different strategies against each other. And what they find is, if the second time you learn something, instead of rereading it, you take a test on it, okay? You answer questions from your memory. Or, for example, if you like concept mapping, right? If you draw a concept map just from your memory without opening any notes, you know where this is going. Your performance on the final test will be much better than in a condition where you just reread your notes or reread the material. Okay? In this effect, memory effect or learning strategy is called retrieval practice. And that's the other big pillar. If you think about learning principles from cognitive psychology, that's the other big thing that we love. Okay? Tests. And how can you do this? How can you implement it right away? Again, as a teacher, instead of, for example, when you do the reactivation of something that you presented on Monday, if you do this revisiting of topic by just posing questions and having students in class produce an answer from their memory, this is all what it takes. You will get that students will be much better and remember it later on. They may be wrong, they may not get the right answer. Therefore, feedback is important, so that you should provide them with concrete feedback on what they got wrong and what the correct answer is. But you will see that they will improve over time their understanding of the material. Another thing that I'm going to do this semester with my students is in the middle of after giving half of the lecture, I'm going to ask them to write down their own questions. It could be questions that they just think they are good questions, or questions that they actually have because they didn't understand something. And you can collect all the questions that they came up with, and you can put them on a quiz later on, so they will experience that you are using their questions to measure assessment. What can students do to use retrieval practice as a strategy? Find lots of questions. Could be questions that are in textbooks, questions that you came up with yourself. Swap questions with your classmates. So try to answer each other's questions from time to time. And use this as your only way to review material. And if you don't get an answer right, you can look up your material then as a form of feedback on it. Okay? Challenges. Only two logistic ones. Already mentioned them a little bit. The first one, you have to get lots of questions. You have to come up with them. You have to find them. Ask your teacher for more questions. Ask questions in lectures. So you have a collection of questions that you can work through when you prepare for your exam. And the other logistic thing is get the correct feedback. So it's crucial that if you don't know the answer to a question, that's totally fine. It's totally fine because you're in the process of learning it. But try to get the right answer. Try to find the right answer in your materials, and if you still have problems finding it, ask your teacher or lecturer. So the beauty about those two strategies, and I think you know where I'm going with this, is that you can combine them and create a power learning strategy by combining spaced retrieval, space practice and retrieval practice. I'm screaming. Retrieval practice, okay? And I need you to just hold this for a second. Cool. I prepared this little visual here, okay? So basically, this is a combination of both strategies. As you can see, material is introduced during session 1, and then you revisit the material at different intervals. And what you can see here are two things. First, you always practice or re-practice the material by taking a test. This is the yellow thing here, okay? And another thing you can do is you can increase the time between one learning session and the other. This is basically expanding, okay? So you have a lecture on Monday, you review on, let's say, Wednesday, and then you review the Wednesday the week after, and then a month after, and so on, okay? And then you have the final test. Another thing you can do, and this is the last strategy, it's called interleaving. Okay. This is just to tell you that don't practice only one topic at a time. Okay. So as the first row suggests, topic blue, topic blue, topic blue, and so on. No, practice different topics at the same time. So this is what this colorful thing represents. Okay. And this will make you realize how different topics may have similarities. So you start building knowledge, you start making connections between one topic and the other by mixing them up. And so this is what this is basically. You learn different topics and you review them together in mixed up questions and try to find similarities or ways on how they are different. This again boosts performance and deepens your understanding of the overall material. Thank you. The last thing I want to say is, I already mentioned that there are some logistical challenges to those learning strategies, okay? You have to plan ahead, you need some questions and so on. But there's another very big, I think it's actually the biggest challenge when it comes to applying these learning strategies. And it lies within us. It's something that's called metacognition, okay? And this is basically our subjective assessment on how well we think we understood a topic, okay? And our metacognition will drive the amount of study time and the amount of effort we put in the next time we study material. If we think we mastered material or a topic pretty well, we will not put much more effort into studying that because we think we are good. We don't need to put more time into this. Now, the tricky thing about metacognition is that it plays fools on us, okay? It actually is highly associated with something that we call familiarity with a topic. Learning strategies like, for example, cramming for an exam or rereading notes without taking a test, those strategies actually make us believe that we know the topic pretty well when in fact we don't. So if you ask students or participants in those experiments, like this one was with the testing and without, right? If you ask them after this session, so tell me, how well do you think you will be able to remember the information on a later test? People in this group will tell you, oh, I got everything. I understand everything. I will be able to score 100% on my test. And people who took a test actually will say, I actually felt that there are not too many things that I understood. I have to put more effort in it. So from the testing group, the people who took a test, they actually have a better reflection of how much they will actually understand later on than the people who did not. And so usually learning strategies that feel very hard to do, like for example, retrieving information from memory, which is something that is not easy. It's not fun. Those will get low metacognitive judgments. So people think they will not be successful, when in fact, if you look at the data later on, they are the most successful strategies you can use to learn new information. Okay, so I think I talked a lot. I have only a couple more things. I prepared or cut out those awesome bookmarks from the Learning Scientist. Yes, Jana sitting here from the Learning Scientist today. And I cut out the ones that are relevant for my talk today. So there are bookmarks on how to use a strategy and little prompts on how to do it when you're reading something. On retrieval practice, interleaving and space practice. So feel free to come here and to grab a bookmark. Yeah, that was, yeah, exactly. So that was my input. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you so much.